Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Capitalize the Beat. My name is Jefferson Ellison. I am the principal at Jawbreaking Creative, and I have the pleasure of hosting an interview series with Wicked Weed around Black history and the state of Blackness. And today I am joined by my very best friend, a social commentator, a social anthropologist, if you will, and a woman who is in both equity, diversity, and stands in a lot of ways of the zeitgeist and in the middle of the culture. Crystal Sherriff, thank you for joining me.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and so you have no idea what this interview is going to be about.
Not a clue.
And I didn't want to tell you because when I decided to interview you, which I didn't necessarily think was the best idea at first, because you are in this campaign. But when I started thinking about it, the thing that stood out to me is the fact that you are probably someone who engages with the fullest range of Blackness that I think I know, because you are someone who works with the Diversity Engagement Coalition, right? So you are someone who has conversation around diversity and equity in a corporate professional setting. You're also someone who works with the Buncombe County Land Trust. So you kind of deal with the effects of inequities and how they show up in the world. And you are a young Black woman from the South. So you just are a Black person. On top of that, I know personally that you moderate a book club for the YMI Cultural Center. And so you engage with Blackness on a meta level as well. So I think you are constantly having conversations on what it means to be Black in the world. And so I think you are able to really touch on what it means to be Black in the world. So I guess I kind of want to start with, up until I kind of laid that out just now, did you realize all the different ways in which you are engaging with the Black diaspora?
Yes, in a lot of ways, to me, I think just existing in Blackness in a place where you were never supposed to exist, you were never supposed to thrive on its own every day is revolutionary. Sure. So I already feel revolutionary. And I think all of my Black friends who, whether they're working at a coffee shop or owning their own agency, is revolutionary.
Sure, being Black is political.
Exactly, I really do. So I don't, even when it comes down to, actually was just having a conversation with a friend the other day who is, in very much like activist spaces in Columbus, Ohio. She had a lot of criticisms around certain celebrities who she feels like profits off of Blackness, but when it comes time to be loud about it, they're quiet. And to me, I don't require anything more from Black people than to just exist. And if you can thrive, well, by all means, please. But if nothing else, just exist. So I think me existing in all the different ways that I do is revolutionary, especially as a Black woman, to be honest. So I think, but I also think I have, I suffer from imposter syndrome. And that's why I always let you answer when somebody's like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, what do I do? I don't know. You realize you have a resume and you're constantly updating it. So you know what you do. But when it comes time to own that, sure. And not only be revolutionary in your existence, but kind of like defying the odds, especially for somebody like me, sure. I'm still not comfortable with speaking that and owning that. Sure. It's hard for me to like give you my face and give you my accolades. Like it feels sure. Like, is this even you? Like, who are you even talking about?
And I think something about imposter syndrome, which is something that we talk about a lot and something that we both kind of deal with in different ways, is kind of when you have to kind of stand in the fact that you are in fact consequential, right? Like I am not just relevant, I am impactful. My presence moves something, like dialogue happens because I have created it, right? Like by my presence, by my work, something else has happened. And I think in a lot of ways, what you were saying earlier really touched me, the idea of like not requiring anything from Black people, because that's something that I really had to sit with when I started asking myself, what do I require of Black people, right? It's like, if you recall, last year I did an interview with my father and we were talking about our different political views, and we don't necessarily agree on the best path forward for Blackness. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, the white person who was recording it really wanted us to kind of be pitted against each other. And I was like, no, there's no need for that. We're both still Black. We get to have opinions on things. And I think a lot of ways the reason our relationship is so special is because we do disagree on most things, but we get to, because we both suffer the consequences of the life that we're living. And we live a life together, and we are in the same identities in a lot of ways. And so it's like, it's fine to disagree. I can't require you to be on the same page with it. Mm-hmm. I wonder with your work, with the work that you've been doing with the Diversity Engagement Coalition and the work that you've been doing with the Buncombe County Land Trust, if you have been able to like find that clear line when you realize, because there's no diversity and equity in the corporate space, there becomes a need for a land trust.
Mm-hmm. I think because there is no value, or there has been my cat is going to be around, but because there has been no value placed on Black bodies and Black spaces, you have to create a place where that takes center stage. I think it's really important, like when I think back to when I was an equity consultant for the YMCA, sure. way back when, a huge thing that I wanted to get people to realize was, because they had this question of why is our multicultural group not making strides, but our LGBTQ group is making strides. Sure. And I was like, a glaring thing that I don't think anybody notices, who is leading the LGBTQ conversation? And it was a white identifying woman and a white identifying man. And who is leading the multicultural group? It was a Black woman and a first generation Mexican woman. And I was like, let's talk about this. We're asking. Let's check in, right? So who are leading these kind of meetings? Who's leading these meetings? Which meetings are well attended? Which meetings get things done? Right. So I say all that to say, when we think about the fact that we don't value certain groups, there becomes a need for, a coalition for everybody, all these corporate, people to come together and be like, okay, so we're gonna, for this hour and a half, we are going to focus on this, because we know once we leave here, nobody else is. Sure. And I think the generational consequence of that is something like a community land trust, because the people we don't value, we also don't value their livelihood, we don't value their community. So that's been gobbled up. So,
and because you don't make space for them, because we don't value them in a corporate way, we make it impossible for them to value themselves and then kind of to exist in spite of the whatever failures the system has created.
Right. And so to me, this is both the land trust and the coalition is both trying to, course correct.
Sure.
That's really what I'm realizing all my jobs are about. And I guess that's what all equity work is about. Sure. But it's just course correcting our society in general. But I guess my qualm about that is I think even a course correcting is filtered through a lens of white supremacy. So it feels less like course correcting and more like bandaging. You know what I mean?
Sure. And I actually, that's something I talked about in the third episode of this, is a conversation with Dr. Darren Waters of UNCA. And one thing we talked about is the idea of how Black people in like the 60s and 70s, Black people who, did good and made money still stayed in Black communities. They bought land in the Black communities, had a big house in the Black community. And I was saying, like, it's interesting because like we can say that and we can name that, but then I said, like, I wonder if in Asheville, if a Black person making 250, like if a Black person making 250 grand a year bought a house in Shiloh or bought land in Shiloh and then just built a huge house or whatever in Shiloh, how their life would be different than if they just moved right across the street to Biltmore Forest. In terms of, in a city like Asheville, real estate is almost like a purse. Like I can judge your wealth and your status based off where you live and where you own property. And based off my assumption of that, I then decide if you are bona fide. And and I'll decide if I'm going to invite you places, if we're going to do certain things. And so in the same way you're saying, it's like it's almost like even if Black people wanted to do certain things on their own, the world requires them to have some buy-in to white supremacy to get the necessary capital to then to come in and then come out. But you got to do it first.
And I think what's interesting about all of that is gentrification,
Sure.
because Shiloh has some really beautiful houses.
Good.
Really it's going through its own period right now of gentrification. I remember when we were in high school, my science teacher actually bought a house in Shiloh, white man. And in the same conversation of this man telling me he just bought a house in Shiloh, he was dating this like pretty well-known actress. And I was like,
oh, sure.
Yeah, and I was like, this is just such an interesting conversation because you're buying a house in Shiloh only because it's cheap and you are aware that gentrification is happening at that time on a level that I was not aware of, like gentrification in high school. But this man is like, oh, this property is going to be worth a lot. This land is going through some changes, which is the same thing that's been happening in like the River Arts District, which we all know is the South. But all of us, it's going through its rebranding period. So I guess when, you're like, oh, buying a house in Biltmore Forest versus buying a house in Shiloh, it's like at this point, just buy a house because all of Asheville is like 2 seconds away from.
And that's the thing is that like, it's also, and part of that is because Asheville there's not enough Black people in Asheville for there to be a Black community.
Right. And when you said that, when you were talking about $250,000, a Black family making $250,000, my first thing was a Black family making $250,000 is moving out of Asheville. They don't even live here. They don't exist.
They moved to Atlanta 5 years ago.
They moved to Atlanta. They moved to Charlotte. And so that, it does not exist here. And a big thing that we talk about a lot is retention. Sure. And I think retention is so hard because, and I think, I'm like, before we start talking about retaining, who are we retaining?
But you need to recruitment and retain.
And I think
and what does that look like? Like, I don't know how, because I've been having conversations a lot about with even with young creatives, right? Especially with the work that Honey is doing at Different World and the things that we're doing at Jawbreaking, and even the conversations I've had with my friend Gilly, who owns Where, and it's like, we're young people in creative spaces and everyone seems to love this, but we don't know how sustainable is this conversation about young people being creative. And it's like, they're like, okay, well, how do you invite people here? I'm like, I don't know what you invite. I don't know what you have to offer them. I don't know what the city has to offer Black people to invite them here.
Yeah.
It's not jobs.
You have to, I'm going to be honest, the type of Black person that is attracted to Asheville is typically in their existence revolutionary, going back to that, but they've also probably created a space where people that look like them are not always reflected in their circle.
Sure.
So,
someone who's a Black person attracted to Asheville is probably more comfortable with whiteness and is probably in a lot of ways conditioned either by choice or by force to be okay with a lack of Blackness.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
we both moved back here, but we're also from here. So it's like I am conditioned by force to be okay with the lack of Blackness because this is not new to me.
Right. It's not. So I think that's a huge thing. So I think if you're I think Asheville does have things for creatives. You know, if you
Sure.
are a tattoo artist, if you are wanting to make a band, like what there are spaces for you to live and thrive. I mean, we have 2 celebrities that live here.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's like a young creative celebrities, you know what I mean? We have a tattoo artist, but then when we think about homegrown people who have made their own way and created like creative spaces, they've moved to Atlanta.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like, I think it comes down to what you think you need for your art to thrive. But I do think there is a space. I think it's harder to recruit professional Black people to Asheville rather than creatives.
Oh, and that's what I mean. And truthfully, I know what Asheville has to offer creatives, but that was the question was when we're saying, well, we want creatives to come here. Well, the first question is, what are we offering them? So, okay, you want Black people to come here, what do you have to offer them? And I think in a lot of ways, this kind of leads into where I wanted to go, which is with the Wicked Weed campaign, you know, kind of the whole idea around it was just like, can we just take a moment and make some Black shit happen?
Right.
Like, let us just create and hold space for Blackness because there's just not enough of it. And instead of us, you know, and literally on the email chain, it was like, instead of us talking about Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King, can we just correct history? You know, and like, let's take up space. Let's allow Blackness to take up some space. And hopefully, if in theory, right, like if enough businesses and if enough people in Nashville allowed Blackness to take up space, Blackness would grow. Because it's like, you know, it's like a fish in a fish tank. Like a fish will not grow beyond its tank. And so they always say you buy a big fish tank and you'll see how much bigger your fish will get. But they have to have that room. Like we need to create some breathing space for Black people so that the Black people here can thrive. And then if a Black person is passing by, they're like, oh, I see thriving Black people. Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I should stay. Maybe I should get a home here.
Right.
Maybe.
Buying a home in Asheville.
Different, right?
I met someone and I was like, literally, you would be the only person that would ever say a sentence, or somebody from that state. They were like, yeah, my partner and I moved here for real estate, to purchase real estate. And I was like, you moved here to purchase real estate? That is crazy. I was like, where are you from? California. I was like, all checks out. But you are a rarity because I don't think, like, outside of California and New York, nobody's moving to Asheville like, unless you have a lot of money, you know, like but a normal person, like, we wanted to buy a house and, you know, Asheville's like half of that. I'm like, yeah, it's $400,000-$500,000, but in California it's like $1 million. So,
exactly.
But literally only somebody from California would say that because.
Well, yeah, no, truly. But I also wonder how you have found your Blackness to be received. I mean, you're a well-traveled woman, so like I can ask that, like, in a general sense, like, you've traveled the country, you've traveled the world, like, so it's like, yeah, sure, like, how has your Blackness been received in other places? But I'm really interested in, because as someone who travels with you in social circles and watches how people engage with you, everyone adores you. They think you're so beautiful, so charming, so intelligent, all the things, right? And I wonder if that ever feels like it is a tokenization.
Absolutely. I think, and to be honest, I wonder if my experience with like feeling tokenized would be different if I was lighter skinned or mixed, to be honest.
Sure.
But I think I think especially with beauty, I'm othered, like, because I am a larger woman and I am a darker skinned woman. So I think it's like I am taught that this body is not attractive and somehow I find you attractive. You must be an outlier. You're definitely not the standard in that way.
Incredible. You might, like, you are the most beautiful.
Right. Like, I'm like, am I that attractive, or are you just conditioned to not find me attractive? And because you do, all of a sudden I have to be a 13 on a scale of 1 to 10. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I also think because if you know my history and where I come from, you are surprised that I can hold a conversation with you, or, because I'm from Hillcrest, like that's where I grew up. So it's like, oh, you're really like, so then all of a sudden I'm exceptional because we can hold a conversation, from
the odds.
say
you beat the odds. Yeah.
That was literally a program or like a scholarship in high school.
Yeah.
Beat the odds.
It was done by Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. It was every year.
Yeah. So I think a lot of that, but I think when I leave Asheville, and I start to experience the way people accept me without having having a childhood kind of background thing to attach itself to. I think Black women, I think darker skinned Black women, heavier darker skinned Black women are just, people hear caricatures really, and like that's what they see, and they kind of like automatically assume that, and then they talk to you and they find out like you are a whole individual, you are complex, and I get to exist in my Blackness however that fits me, and it doesn't make me Blacker or less or whatever. I do think there's this moment of like, oh, this person, because I'm existing that way, but I'm still being taken in by like a person conditioned in our society. Sure. So I think a lot of my all the things is kind of like it's heightened because I exist in the body that I do. In the city
that you're in, like in the city that you're in, right? Like I wonder, like if you go to Atlanta or Charlotte or Houston or in parts of South Carolina, Alabama, if you go anywhere, bless you.
Thank you.
If you go to any like bigger city, you'll see more Black people kind of in all their forms, right? And that was something that me and Dr. Waters touched on as well, was the idea of like of the legacy of Black people, right? And like the idea that it seems like the world really only has one understanding of Blackness, which is why the campaign was so important for me, that it did exist in 4 parts, and that we showcase different types of Black musicians and different Black bodies and different scenarios, and in a lot of ways, and kind of paying homage to different types of Black people. Like, I wanted there to be a moment where I wanted there to be box braids. Right? I wanted Bantu knots. I wanted different shades and different sizes of Black people. I wanted there to be a girl with her hair wrapped, a carefree Black girl, a guy who's kind of dressed like a rapper in a way. I need these moments to happen so you can see that like Blackness, all these things feel very different to you. They're also still very Black. And music is spanning from smooth jazz, which if you know anything about old Black men, smooth jazz is a very Black thing, right? Smooth jazz and R&B to, alternative rock, if you will, and it's all still Black.
Yes.
And I think that is something that I think you and I experience together a lot, is that people are so kind of shocked that the two of us exist in the same place, right? They're like, but you guys are both so exceptional, and I thought exceptional things only happen at one time, and it's like, no, actually, we're just pretty normal. You're just not used to seeing it, and so you're used to seeing one Black person. You're just like, oh, they must be perfect. It's like, no, we're normal.
Right.
There could be 2 of us together.
Could be 4 of us.
There could be 6 of us together.
if you act out and catch us at the right time, it's gonna be 6 of us. Oh, and this, and it's great. It's like, oh, who are these random Black people?
If you act out, there could be a whole squad.
It could be a whole squad all of a sudden, and everybody's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of times, I think people expect us to want, like, I think people when they meet Black people who they find charming, intelligent, attractive, whatever, they just assume in a lot of ways that type of Black person would want to immerse themselves in whiteness. So, especially in the city. So when you see this type of Black person and they're, trying to find the other 3 Black people in the city, whatever, it's like, oh, whoa, look at that. I thought you wanted a white boyfriend and your best friend's name was Maggie. And I'm like, no, I mean, that could happen too. And I also can still enjoy hanging out with Black people because I don't need to be the only Black person in a room to feel special. I don't need to tokenize myself.
Right, and that's something that was that's really interesting the way you said that. The idea that they just assume that you would be looking for whiteness, right? And I think I remember this is one time. I remember it was the summer before last. It had to be, and our friend had come up from Charlotte with her friend, who you all went to college with, and we all went to brunch.
Okay.
It was when Anika and Rachel came up from Charlotte that weekend, and we went to brunch at Rhubarb.
Oh, yes.
Right. I remember specifically, we went to brunch, and we were the only Black people there, and we just had a really great time, right? Like, we had a bougie brunch, like, we had good food, we had laughs, we sat outside. Mm-hmm. And I just remember thinking, that was like probably one of the first times that I felt being Black was political. Because I had this moment where I was like, we're being kind of loud. And I was like, and then I think it was either you or Nika, so like, not louder than anyone else. Like, and I was, it was just like us being at a table, having a, 3-figure brunch per, right? Like, and having a good time and feeling dressed up and taking up space and, asking the waiter for more things and not being afraid to, tell them that my drink is wrong, just being who I am, being a normal person, right? While also being Black, and not feeling the need to code switch feels like such an act of defiance.
I never realized how taxing code switching was until I moved out of the States and I moved to an all Black country that I didn't have to, living in the Caribbean, living in St. Vincent, even in St. Lucia, like, there was never, I could just exist how I was, and I was never already on the defense of how is somebody going to receive me. So let me make sure I'm as palatable as possible. So whatever they get, at least, best case scenario. And I realized living there the whole time, like, this subconscious thing that I was doing all the time. And I realized that I was doing it because I was realizing I never did it like around anybody else. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, how have you been existing and living your entire life with this double consciousness? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of insane if you study it on like a psycho, like, analytical level. It's like I'm literally living with like a double consciousness all the time.
Yes.
I think that is insane. So
and it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. And I truly think in like generations to come, it might be like diagnosed as like something. I should not have to flip back and forth between voices, between interests, between thoughts, like between expression, like all the time. But like in a contained way, it's two people. It's literally two, I don't know. It weirded me out realizing how much time I spent doing that when it was like, I almost felt like my brain had more space to like flesh me out as a whole being.
Sure.
It was the wildest thing. So I told myself, I was like, when you go back to the States, that is not going to be a thing ever again. And I'm going to say what I would say in front of you that I would say in front of anyone else, obviously respectfully, of course, but like, who I am as I am is okay. And I should not be so hyper aware just because I'm Black that I need to force myself to have some weird Valley Girl scent, or even if I'm around Black people, put on some random Black scent. Like, what is that? Who?
So I am going to respond to that in a way that's positively going to make me cry, and then we have to move on. As you said, who I am as I am is okay. I think about Elijah McCain, who was killed by essentially police officers and EMS. And one of the things he's on the spectrum, and he was stopped, and they kind of asked him like, "Well, why are you dressed like this?" He's like, "I'm cold." And he's like, "It's summer, whatever. It's a warm day." And he said, like, I don't break the law. I'm just different, right? Like, and that's okay. But for him, it wasn't, right? Like, there's something really powerful about the fact that if any therapist would tell you who you are as you are is okay, but they can't promise you that in the world.
Right.
And that is such a real reality that I think is it, even when, and like, especially after you stop code switching, right? You realize if you stand in that truth of who I am as I am is okay, you have essentially opened yourself up for a greader risk. Because if you refuse to code switch, that means you're going to piss some people off. And I know for me, something that that's come up a lot in the last year or so has been the fact that I feel like in a lot of ways I have to apologize for being a flawed person, and I have to keep reminding myself and reminding the people around me that it's like, we don't owe perfection to anyone. So it's like, we have to live in a world, and I want to live in a world where if we're too loud, or if we get too drunk, or if we have too good of a time, or if we get in a fight, or if mistakes happen, that the world does not end. Because like, that has got to be okay. I can't be afraid to, respond to a person because I'm afraid they're going to think of me as angry.
Right. That's so important. So important. Like, our feelings are valid, our experiences are valid. And even when I hear like, you don't owe perfection to anyone, what even is this level? What is perfection? Like, right. And by whose standard? Right. And that's what I feel like when I'm code switching. It's like, whose standard of perfection is this? Like, who told me this was perfection?
Right. Why did I switch here? Why didn't I switch there?
Yeah, like
I could be speaking French right now. Why am I speaking?
The only reason I don't is because I don't know how. And that's really what it boiled down to me is this sense of acceptance, and who am I trying to be accepted by, and who told me that the way I naturally was would automatically be rejected. Right. And do I care about this imaginary standard that I do not have to accept? And right. Like, who's perfection? That's my big thing. Whenever we talk about code switching, who are you code switching for, and why? And who told you that you needed to be that way? And are you okay with kind of buying into that? Like, I understand we all have our conditionings, but for me, I think my whole thing is rewiring all of that. And sure. I hope as we become, as we're at least trying to become a more equitable space, and we're really trying to, put a lens on how we've grown up, the things that we've been taught. I hope really coming with a sense of rewiring, and not just a sense of guilt, not just a sense of acknowledgement, not just a hashtag. I hope it comes with an actual rewiring.
It's amazing that that's where you got to. And as we wrap this up, it's like, because that really is, even what you, that last part of what you just said, is that really is the whole point of the campaign. It's like the idea that perfection is like that of who's perfection. It's the world standard that they're showing me every day on TV, on Instagram, in books and movies. And so the only way to change that narrative is to stop showing it, to actually show other things, because at the end of the day, iconography coming from big businesses in Hollywood is what creates the standards that we live within. So if we want to, if we want people to know that, you know, non-white things are okay, we need to elevate non-white stories to the same place that the whiteness has been living, on the TV, in the magazine pages. It's like, just show me something else. And so now, you know, I mean, now it's the small things, but now people get to stumble upon Wicked Weed's page or their YouTube or their website or wherever, or when you Google Wicked Weed now, they get to see Blackness. And so for the 13-year-old Black kid in Compton who dreams of making craft beer, he at least sees himself in the conversation.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, that's the first step, recognizing that there is a way in which your identity and your personal identity and your existence within a greater world can come together. I wrote a piece on the site about visibility, and I was like, until I saw gay relationships on TV, I did not know what that would look like. So I could not hope for it. You know what I mean? Like, I had to see it, and once you saw it, you're like, oh, right. That's what that would look like. And now I know that it can look like that. And then when I saw Black people engage in that, I was like, oh, it can look like me and like that.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about, I can only speak for little Black girls, but is you are constantly living in an imaginary space, like a double imaginary space when you watch like rom-coms and stuff. I loved rom-coms, you know, in high school. The Notebook, 27 Dresses, like Fool's Gold, all of it. I watched them all, Jesus, ate them up, Pride and Prejudice. And you never saw anybody that looked like you in these things. So you are always, it's like, this obviously is a movie, but people could have that life, but I have to make believe with the make believe. Like, it's like,
yeah,
I've never seen this for me, but maybe in a dream, I could, you know, have somebody come sweep me off my feet, or I could make a guy fall in love with How to Make a Guy Fall in Love in 10 Days. I could do that in a quirky, witty way with like cute pixie hair and a pink crop top. Maybe I too can live that dream, but it's like, God, you're always just trying to imagine and put yourself into that space, because you don't see that, you know, especially not for Black women, not really, except for our 5 loving basketball, love James. Like, what else do you got?
Right. And then that movie with Queen Latifah.
Oh, the one with Common. What is that? That's right. That's right.
Well, and also Last Holiday.
Okay, I'm gonna catch up, girl. I'm gonna catch up. The classics.
No, but I do wonder. I wonder if that. I've never heard it said like that before, but I want, like, the idea of always having to reimagine the make-believe, right? And like, you have to make-believe on top of the make-believe. And I wonder if that's why Black people are so creative, because for our entire existence, we've been envisioning a world where we can survive. And we've been envisioning a world where we too get to fall in love and to, you know, to be quirky and charming and like spill wine on a white dress and twirl in Italy. Like, we have been forced to stretch our imagination so far. And like, as a way of surviving.
In the 70s, that's why Afrofuturism was so popular, is because there's this, extreme upheaval, civil rights and all the things. And so people started trying to imagine, like, on what planet could we be free? Let's talk about that. Let's just do that with our creative energy, I read about that and thought it was really interesting. Like
that makes total sense to me.
Oh yeah, Black people deserve a spot in futuristic novels, because hello, like, clearly things are just fuck for us here. Might as well let's
let's
get to the other planet.
We'll be the first ones on the airplane out of this place.
Okay, can we? I mean, goodness, underwater, I can be a mermaid.
Where can I go, Lord? Tell me.
Where can we be, Jesus? Where can I just be, Jesus?
Oh God!
I can't just go to Atlanta, Lord.
You are the light of my life. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I really appreciate it. I'm always happy to talk to you, and I'm happy to share more of you with the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation.
Oh, I love you. I'll talk to you soon.
I love you too. Bye.